me a little bit about your organisation and the area of work that it represents?
Yeah, so SWAN supports families with children with undiagnosed and rare genetic conditions. So when I founded the organisation in 2012, my daughter was currently undiagnosed and I was looking for a support group, only to find there wasn't anything. And then I found SWAN in the UK, and then, I thought there was a need here, and rather than whinge about it, I did something about it. But having known how much work and how much it would consume my life, I probably never would have done it. And the fact that I worked for nothing for so long, but it's just grown and grown as an organisation because, we now have genomics and we now have the NDIS. So, support sector has grown, but also the health sector and the opportunity for more families to be diagnosed has also grown.
Can you tell me a bit about your background and how you came to be in the role as Chief Executive?
Yes, so as I said, I've got a personal connection through my daughter, which was the passion that drove me to establish SWAN. I worked for nothing for 6 years. I shouldn't say nothing. No physical
remuneration. Remuneration. Yep.
Yep. And then I was very fortunate and had a philanthropy fund and come to me and said, we really like what you're doing. We think what you're doing is really important work. Would you like to apply for a health grant? So I was invited to apply for a health grant, which funded my position for 12 months. And then I applied again and got an additional 18 months worth of funding. So I guess when I moved from a voluntary president role into the CEO role where I got paid, that's, it made a big difference. And I think, it makes our organisation seem a little bit more professional as well to have a paid CEO rather than just a volunteer president. So that's sort of how I came to become CEO, I guess.
How big is SWAN?
Look, we support well over 500 members, but we also support professionals. So, for instance, a genetic counsellor might come to me and say, look, do you know of any supports that you could offer this family? I get invited to present to, geneticists, to paediatricians, to students. So we, offer support for both the Melbourne and the Sydney Masters of Genetic Counselling course, telling the story in the hope that professionals can support our families better as well.
What is your background before you started?
Before I started SWAN, I worked for local government for 9 years as a project and events officer, I guess. And, with that, I was involved in writing our little areas, bit of the strategic plan and business, and looked after their website and, coordinated events and did a bit of marketing for them. But unfortunately, when my daughter started school, there was no after school care because she has a disability, and council weren't prepared to compromise on times to finish, so I had to resign.
And do you think there's particular qualities you need to have to run a successful charity?
Yeah, you've got to have passion. Without passion, you can't do what you do. You've got to have empathy. And I think having that lived experience through my daughter really can set you apart because, we have SWAN families who I support on the phone and they'll say at the end of the call, oh, thank you. It's just so nice to be able to speak to someone who gets it, and I think, I've got all this information. My daughter is 14 now, so I've got a lot of disability and health information in my head. And sometimes I think you forget how much knowledge you have that you're able to share with others. So
that's right.
I think lived experience, I'm not saying you can't do this job if you don't have lived experience, but it certainly helps.
I mean, you mentioned about the remuneration, but are there other particular difficulties that you had to overcome, I guess, to actually get the charity going and sort of maintain it?
Yeah, look, I mentioned the fact we've grown. So I think even, when we started out, we were kind of seen as a little, support group, pat on the back. But now, I get invited onto, health consumer advisory groups. So, with that, people, health professionals respect SWAN as an organisation. And I think it takes time to build up that respect and those relationships. So we're seen as adding value to their workforce because of the work we do. Whereas at the start, we were really just a no one. So it does take time to build up those connections and those supports, and, to be able to, work those relationships so everyone benefits as well. But it means we can help more families, and, geneticists can say, well, actually, we can't give you an answer, but we can point you in the direction of a great support group. So, whereas before, I really didn't know what I was doing at the start. I didn't have a lot of guidance, and I made a lot of mistakes. I learned from them, and I'm still making mistakes, and I'm still learning from them. I guess one of the challenges that, all support groups face is sustainability. And I know we have to do fundraising because, I'm going to have no money by the end of the year to pay myself. But it's just actually finding the time to do that, because there's only so much we can do in the day. I'm funded for 30 hours. I probably work more like 50 hours on it. And that's not sustainable long term. And you couldn't probably expect someone else to come into this role who didn't have the passion to do what I do as well.
You just need maybe more support for yourself as
absolutely.
Do your job.
Look, I'd love to employ a full-time communications person. I hate doing the social media, but I do it because I have to. It's not my area. I'd much rather have a coffee with someone than post something on Facebook.
Are there any particular initiatives that SWAN's currently implementing or planning?
So we're doing a lot of work at the moment around, education and support. So we're developing a series of brochures, and we're developing some easy English resources as well. And we're developing a new website. We're doing a lot of advocacy around the government's proposed introduction of independent assessments around the NDIS. So we do a lot of lobbying and submissions. I meet with a lot of politicians around that, around genomic testing, getting funding for genomics. So there's always advocacy work to do. There's probably the need for us to do individual advocacy work as well, but I just don't have the resources to do it. Do the odd little bit if I think there's really a need. But there's always work. The job is so diverse, from, the systemic advocacy work that our parents wouldn't even know I was doing if they don't read the newsletter, but and it doesn't affect them, to, providing opportunities for parents to connect up with support, providing information through workshops. We run a Meet the Expert series, usually once a month, where we invite a guest speaker to talk on things like wills and estates, or caring for yourself, or, variant curation, a variety of topics. And we do virtual events so parents can connect up. We do a variety of them. So we've got an over 10s group. We run a dads group. We're going to relaunch our siblings group next year. We started it, but because of COVID, it got pulled. There's work around Rare Disease Day, and we also facilitate Undiagnosed Children's Awareness Day each year, except we pulled it 2 days before this year. So we're moving it to October for next year. So there's always different things to do. And I said, I think also I sit on quite a few committees and community advisory groups, because I think that's a really good way to advocate for change, which gets better supports and information to our families as well.
What do you think we're collectively doing well in the health sector and health system at the moment?
Look, I think our government's very supportive of investing in health research. So we've got the precision medicine plan. They've invested in genomics for advances in technology. They're investing in research with the Medical Future Research Fund. So I think there is the commitment there. I think, workforce has a lot of investment. I don't think they're investing enough in peer support groups, which I see as the final piece of the pie of holistic health support, because we're the ones at the end of the day picking up the pieces. A patient might not be able to get in to see a geneticist, but they can contact a support group that can help them and say, well, this is what happened, this is typical of a child this age to develop this, to offer reassurance. So, I think more work needs to be done to use peer support groups as a resource in workforce. But I think, we're very fortunate in Australia. We've got a good health system. And I think it is challenging in rural areas, definitely, when you don't have the services available. And if you're from a cold background, I think it's also challenging. And if you have an intellectual disability, it is also challenging as well, because there's not accessible information out there for people.
Yeah. So parents are really the advocates, aren't they? They become the advocates.
But not everyone can advocate. Like I would say parents are, usually the best experts when it comes to their child. But not everyone has the ability to advocate in an effective way. And there's different ways to advocate in different circumstances. So, lobbying a politician might not always be the right answer. It might be sit on a committee, give your community view from if you're a patient advocate, about how we can do things better. And I think it's important to come with a solution, or say, I see this would work better, rather than just whinge about it. It doesn't achieve anything. You're just negative. You've got to be more positive and try and give back with a solution. And that's a much better way of advocating. But advocacy isn't for everyone. If you're introverted, you might not feel comfortable. You might, it takes time to advocate. It takes patience. It takes skills. And it's not for everyone. And that's why I think it's so important that we can do systemic advocacy to get better results overall for our families. We've advocated for a very long time to get a Medicare item for sequencing, but it took Australian Genomics to use Melbourne Genomics data to take that to MSAC to get it through. Whereas if I went and just put an application in, it wouldn't have got nowhere. But we're happy to write a letter of support, and we're happy to tell the stories about what it means to our families, so further funding can be, given down the track. And, maybe in 2 years' time, we might have a Medicare item number for children over the age of 10, not just under the age of 10.
Right. Okay. No. Is there a particular moment or memory that stands out for you where you really felt like the work you and your colleagues are doing made a difference to the community? So patients, families, community?
Yeah, it's been a shocking, really tough year. But, I had a family come a couple of years ago to one of those events, and she came to me at the end of the day with tears in her eyes and said, "Thank you so much. You don't know what this means to me. I came at the start of the day and I didn't know anyone who had a child with a disability, let alone an undiagnosed genetic condition. And now I'm leaving with 3 friends." And, that really touched me. And I think, it's very different. My daughter is 14 now. And when we went through the first 5 years, we were linked in with an early childhood intervention service. And she did a lot of group therapies, so speech, OT, physio. She did a little sensory program and a hydrotherapy. So I got to meet lots of different parents, and, we still connect up to this day. There's about 12 of us who regularly meet. And I think, it's the way we now have the model went to a key worker and the therapist came to you. And now with NDIS, people aren't even connecting with these early childhood intervention services. They're just having independent therapy. Parents are actually a lot more isolated. And that's where groups like SWAN, that can offer peer support groups, really play a part in trying to connect parents with one another. Now, we didn't have the NDIS, and I hate to think how many thousands of dollars I spent on therapy for my daughter, just trying to get her to walk and talk. But what I did have was peer support, and never underestimate the value that peer support plays. No one gets it like another parent going on a similar journey.
That's right. It gives people sort of hope, I guess, when you're talking about something they can relate to. Yep.
Yeah, like, if my daughter's trashing a house, chances are someone else in that group's child is also trashing their house. So it's kind of like it's almost like a secret club. People just get it and no one judges. Whereas I think some times out in the community, when your child isn't behaving the way you would expect a typical child at that age to behave, people are judgmental and people will say things, whereas it's a lot more relaxed. We went to, I'll just give you an example. We went to Dream Day at the zoo on Saturday, and we partnered with Association for Children with Disability in Victoria. They invited us to partner with them and invite some of our families along. So the zoo was closed to the general public. It was just families who had kids with disabilities. And it was a really relaxing day because no one blinked an eyelid if your child was behaving inappropriately.
Yeah.
And That's, we've still got a long way to go with inclusion. I think inclusion is great, but through schools, through workforce, through just general community, we've still got so much more work to do before we can sit back and go, hey, we're there, isn't this great?
The workforce generally that would be needed for people, for families.
So, I've spoken to medical students and I said I speak a lot to the Masters of Genetic Counselling students because they're the future, and they want to know what support's out there to help their work. You've got to, I feel like, we've got a duty to put in, and I certainly feel that genetic counselling, we were never offered genetic counselling. My daughter was misdiagnosed twice with life-threatening conditions. We waited 5 years in total over a 9-year period for test results to come back, and no parent should have to do that, which is why I advocate so hard for better testing, faster turnaround times, better access. So I think, I think it's really good to be able to give back so other parents don't go through what we did, and more people have access to genetic counsellors if they're getting, great training and exposed to a whole variety of peer support groups and genetic conditions. It's going to help future generations coming behind, both parents and health professionals as well.
What do you think are the most important things for people in the community to know about SWAN?
That we exist. We want geneticists. No, I'm serious. We have a problem.
Yep.
Geneticists are so busy, they actually don't think about the value of peer support, and I think just even getting them to give a SWAN brochure is sometimes a difficult task. And I've had parents come to me quite angry and aggressive almost, saying, why did I not know about your support group? And I think, well, I know that particular geneticist definitely has our brochure. There's no excuse. Most geneticists, particularly in Victoria, should know about SWAN. So I guess, raising awareness is one of our key priorities so we can support more families. We estimate 2,500 children are born every year, but why have we only got 500 people on our database, or just over 500? And I know, look, we have people come in and out, and if someone's diagnosed with a condition that now has a support group, then we ask them to leave SWAN because we want to support the people who fall through the gaps, who there's no support group for. And, sometimes, unfortunately, the reality is some of our children pass away. So then people don't want to be connected with SWAN anymore because it's too painful for them. So we're kind of a transient place with our membership as well. But then we've certainly got a lot of people who will stay with us for a long time. So I think one of the challenge for us is, raising awareness and, resources. I'd love to be able to have one of me in every state and just, really support families properly on the ground level, because it is very hard for one person to do everything they're doing and support over 500 families, plus do all the systemic advocacy, plus do all the, giving back and trying to work with clinicians to make the genetic process and the diagnostic journey easier. We want to support the people who have nowhere else to go. And, a lot of our families, they might just get a gene change name. That's it. They might be one or two of the world. So why would we ask them to leave just because a lot of ways they're no better off? So if they got diagnosed with Fragile X or leukodystrophy, we'd say you're much better joining that group because they can offer support that's going to be more targeted at you. So, we can't support everyone. So we say we want to support those for which there's no active peer support group. Now, some of these conditions, people set up research arms, research group to drive research, but they don't offer the peer support. So then they can stay with SWAN because it's different. Okay. I guess our thing that sets SWAN apart in a number of ways is that we really focus on supporting families and connecting them with one another to limit isolation, because it's so isolating when no one can give you a name. And I often equate it to being in limbo land, and that's a land full of isolation, uncertainty, frustration, you really are in limbo land, because often you don't know what's going on with the child. Do they have a regressive condition? Is it progressive? How much longer are they going to live for? Or should I be doing more? Is there a targeted treatment for them? So we work in a lot with Genetic and Support Network in Victoria, Genetic and Rare Disease Network in WA, and Australian Genetic Alliance in New South Wales. So they're the peak bodies sort of looking after the peer support groups. Because we look after undiagnosed, where we work and we have a collaboration called the GUARD collaboration, where we can do systemic advocacy work as well.